And I had been so fortunate because Marcia Zinberg, this lovely editor I had, got me back the rights to the books I'd written for Harlequin, which in those days was absolutely amazing. You just didn't get your rights back. And I started putting them up on Amazon and just kept on writing and putting up my backlist and started doing quite well. I'm not a writer who ever made six figures. I made high five figures in the beginning of Amazon and at the end of Harlequin. But I've never thought that making money is the thing you should aim for. I really feel you should search for joy instead. And if writing makes you happy, then write what you want to write. See, the people that made big money on Harlequin were the ones who wrote what the editors wanted them to write, wrote in stories, and only wrote what they were told to write. I couldn't do that. I couldn't.
Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectives, and welcome to episode 339 of the Stark Reflections podcast. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. In today's episode, I have an interview with Bobby Hutchinson. Now, Bobby Hutchinson writes stories about almost everything, as long as everything involves romance, quirky people, outrageous kids, deafness, time travel, or medicine, most of which she's familiar with. Bobby started writing by making up a short story while training for the Vancouver Marathon. She won first prize in her very first short story that she wrote in a Chatelaine magazine short story writing contest, then sold her first novel to Harlequin, and has gone on to write and publish about 60 more books since then. At 83 years of age, she's showing no signs of slowing down. She's continuing to love life and to romance her writing life in ways that most of us can only imagine or aspire to. Now, Bobby and I had a fantastic conversation, and I'm so thrilled to share it with you later in this episode. But right now, let's hear a word about this episode's sponsor. This episode is sponsored by the patrons of the Stark Reflections podcast. A huge shout out and thank you to my awesome patrons of the podcast. You know who you are, and a warm welcome to Sky McKinnon, who recently joined the awesome team of folks who support this podcast over at patreon.com/Stark Reflections. I'm so delighted to get to provide extra value for my patrons, which include additional bonus episodes and additional other content, as well as this limited time offer for my patrons as a sort of end of year thank you to my patrons. I have a patron only coupon code that's good for the Smashwords store. I'm going to get my act together and also do one for direct sales as well, but you know, guy can only do so many things at a time, and the Smashwords Draft to Digital platform made it so much easier to create a coupon code very, very quickly. So if you go to the Smashwords store, you can get any 6 of my books for writers, which include an author's guide to working with libraries and bookstores, Wide for the Win, Killing It on Kobo, the 7 P's of Publishing Success, Publishing Pitfalls for Authors, and co-authored an author's guide, or accounting for authors, I should say, which I co-authored with D.F. Hart. But you can get all 6 or any 6 of those for 99 cents each. It means, yes, you can get all 6 of them for less than $6, but that's only good until January 31st, and 24. There'll be a link in the show notes over to the Patreon site that reveals the awesome coupon code that you can get access to. And yes, even if you're a patron for $1 a month, and you only need to become a patron for 1 month in order to get access to the code, you can go ahead and do that and get all 6 books for less than $6. And that is just me wanting to thank my patrons for being there and supporting this show. I love having you guys there and really do appreciate you supporting this podcast. And now for comments from recent episodes. Over on the Twitter sphere, at Edwin Downward said, the latest Stark Reflections with Mark Leslie, which was episode 338, an amazing effing pivot into shit tons of money with James Fell, came with a rare language wording. Little does he know that I listen to the Rebel Author, where those kinds of words are heard all the time. And he's talking about Sasha Black's The Rebel Author podcast. And I do love the way that Sasha just all no holds barred in terms of the language that she uses, and very unapologetic about it, because she's awesome and that's who she is, and it's amazing. Edmund said, what did I take away from his guest? I think it's our need to know what we want. And so right, Edwin. James knows what he wants, knows what he was working for, and was writing the kind of thing that he wanted to write, and didn't let anyone stop him from doing it his way, old Frank Sinatra style. But I want to go back to Sasha Black and the swearing. And Sasha guest hosted. She actually took over, and being the rebel that she is, took over an episode. I'll have a link to that in the show notes. And I loved having her do that. So I think that might have been that episode and this episode with James, where I think I didn't bleep out the adult language. And anyone who knows me outside of the podcast knows that I do use adult language. I swear. I curse. I swear. I tend to try to not to do it when I'm as much in the author sphere, when I'm working as a professional within the writing community, and I very purposely edit out adult language from the podcast, not because I'm offended by it, but I'm doing it to ensure that the podcast is available to the broadest audience possible, because I don't have to put the adult language explicit tag when it gets posted places like Apple Books specifically, and other places like that. So that's one of the reasons why, not because I am personally offended. I do want to make the show as accessible to as many writers as possible, and sometimes that means taming down some of the adult language as well, because some people are so fixated on their being offended to the language that they don't end up benefiting from the things that I think they can benefit from. But then sometimes when you have the right host, the rebel host, or the right guest, you have them on there because you admire that's what they're all about, and therefore, offering that that warning is going to hopefully appease some of the people who may be surprised when that comes up. So anyways, that's why I did that. But yeah, I will have a link to Sasha's episode, and of course a link to the last episode. Thank you for that, Edwin. Appreciate that. And over on YouTube for episode 336, Coming Out of the Writer Closet with Bradley Charbonneau, Nikki Gerlain said, really good episode. We could all use more levity. Oh my goodness. Yes, we can. And if I actually get my act together to properly connect with Bradley on this, I do want to do something very special with Bradley for patrons of the podcast early in the new year. Bradley and I were talking about it a couple weeks ago, and of course I got all scattered and sidetracked as I do. So thanks for reminding me with that comment, Nikki. Just a reminder, y'all can leave comments over at starkreflections.ca for any episode. You can @ me on the various social medias. And apparently YouTube's a great place for easily leaving those comments. I love your comments because it reminds me of the value of your reflections and the things you're thinking about when you're listening to these episodes. And now in terms of a bit of a personal update, so I have been working, as I mentioned briefly in the last episode, been working on Creatures from the Library, project in support of youth from the Sudbury area, and particularly my area, Onaping Falls, Levack, Onaping, Dowling, Cartier, etc., from my area of where I grew up, about 45 minutes northwest of Sudbury, Ontario, and am planning some events in the Sudbury area in March to correlate with that. I have reached out to a number of the winners and the people who will be included in the anthology, and I'm working hard on getting those contracts out, getting the payment over to the right people, and of course getting that book ready because it's coming out in March. Another book that's coming out in March is The Only Monsters in the Building, the next book in my Canadian Werewolf series. And admittedly, for the last several weeks, I've taken a hiatus from the updates I was doing on that. I'm making some progress on that in November, but I really need to double down on that in the next few days and get the first draft done so I can get that off to my editor. In terms of other stuff, it's funny, I woke up the other morning and I was laying in bed, and just during the holiday season, because there's not as much on my plate work-wise to get done, I don't need to get up at 5:30. So I kind of turned off my alarm. Well, I turned it off one time when I was staying up really, really late. I think Alexander and I were watching Die Hard, then Die Hard 2. I think it was Christmas Eve. And I just wanted to sleep in the next day, so I didn't want to get up at 5:30. And I woke up at 6:30 instead. My body starts to get me up close to 6 anyways. And I was lying in bed one day with the alarm not jumping me out of bed, which is what normally happens. The alarm goes off and I'm up. When I don't set it, I just kind of lay there for a while and maybe go back to sleep. Or the cats usually have different ideas about, hey, well, he's stirring. Let's make him feed us. But I was reflecting on my love of beer and Hamilton, where I lived for a long time. And suddenly this concept for another book related to Hamilton, a nonfiction book, and beer came to mind. The title, the subtitle, exactly what I was going to include in it. And so I jumped out of bed and as I was getting the coffee and everything ready in the morning, I had to scribble down all of these things that I knew. And it's kind of funny that this happens because I already have several other books on the go, back burner books that I haven't even talked about in a long time. And yet there is something about that spark of inspiration that always hits the forefront. We see a lot of memes in that where the writers are always like looking at the next project, not the one that they should be working on right now. But that's my curse, and I have lived with it for these 53, or am I 54? I can't remember. I'll have to go and do the math. No, it's going to be 50. Yeah, I turned 54, so I turn 55 next year because it's 2024. There you go. That's what it is. I am 54 now, and I'll be 55 next year. That's what it is. See, I can do the math in my head. But I've had that curse. I've had that curse of that creative curse where I am excited about that next project. And interestingly enough, that Hamilton beer book is not the only thing that I added in the last month to my list of, okay, here's another book that I'm going to put on the list. And it's kind of funny because I put the Canadian Mounted. I put the book about planes, trains, and automobiles. I had that on the back burner for years before I finally wrote it. And I think what finally did it for me was getting the pre-order up. I got the pre-order up and then went, okay, I guess I got to start working on it now. And then it became a completely different, not completely different, but quite a bit of a different book than I had initially imagined. So sometimes, and you're going to hear this from the interview coming up with Bobby, sometimes that butt in chair, just getting the butt in chair and getting started on the project is going to give it some of that life that you're thinking of. So that's it for my brief, not so brief, personal update in the introductory matter. Why don't you and I take a little walk just around the corner, this beautiful little cafe where you're going to get the chance to listen in on a wonderful conversation that Bobby Hutchinson and I had a few months ago. I'm so excited that I get to bring it to you today. Bobby, welcome to the Stark Reflections podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled.
Yeah, I'm thrilled too to get to share some of the cool things that I know you're going to be able to share with my listeners. So let's get into, so where did writing begin for you? Where did it all start?
Probably before you were born. It was 1980 and I was 40 years old.
Oh,
I'd sold
wait, you were
this.
40 years old when it started.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
And I was around, by the way.
I won't ask how old.
It's okay. It's okay. I've been
Um,
around for at least a decade or two.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so there you go. Cool. No, so you started when you were 40. What was it that prompted you to start writing then?
Well, I'd had a boutique in Vancouver. I made handmade clothes,
Okay.
and I had it for 12 years. And I'd raised three sons. I was raising three sons, and my customers kept saying, I was selling it, and they kept saying, "Well, what are you going to do?" And I, as a joke, said, "I'm going to write pornographic poetry." And of course, some people, they have no sense of humor, so they took me seriously. So what I decided to do was run the Vancouver Marathon while I thought about what to do. And
I'm gonna run a marathon because it'll give me a good 4.5 hours to think through this, right?
so I don't know whether you're a runner, but it's so boring to train for a marathon.
It takes a long time, yeah.
You're running and running. So I started reading a book called How to Write Short Stories because I thought, okay, I can probably write a short story in my head while I'm training for this stupid marathon. So I did. And I wrote it down. And Chatelaine, our lovely Canadian magazine, had a contest going. And it was $5,000 for the best short story in Canada. So I
Okay.
wrote this thing down, and I didn't know that much about writing. I did know you should write about what you knew.
Okay.
And my middle son was profoundly deaf. So I made up a story about the problems of raising a deaf kid and running and family life. And I
Okay.
called it Phidippides Was Not a Family Man, because Phidippides was the Greek who ran to Athens to say, we won the war.
Right.
And
The marathon. Yeah.
marathon. Yeah. So I shipped this thing off, and I had to teach myself to type. I didn't know how to type.
Okay.
So I did it on a typewriter and sent the thing off. And the day after I ran the marathon, I
Right.
got a letter because I was so sure this would go nowhere. I hadn't even included a phone number.
Oh.
And they sent me a special delivery letter saying I'd won first prize in the Chatelaine short story contest.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
I was totally, at first, I thought maybe I didn't write it, maybe I just channeled the damn thing. And then I realized, no, I had written it.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, if they pay me $5,000 for 5,000 words, I can probably make money at this. And I was a businesswoman. I'd run a business.
Right.
So I bought, I researched which books were selling well, and Harlequin was the one.
Yes.
So my mother would never let me read them. She figured they were trash.
Yeah.
And so I bought 100 of them in all the different lines and researched which one would have the least number of submissions and which one was paying well. And of course, it was super romance. So I set out to write a super romance. It took me, I think, 3 or 4 months
Okay.
of working hard. And I remember typing it out before I sent it and cutting it into pieces because there were no computers in those days.
Mm.
Anyway, sent this thing off, and 6 weeks later, got a phone call from Marcia Zinberg, who said, we want to buy it. And
Wow.
and now this thing was 185,000 words. And now I was getting
That's a lot longer than the super romances were what? They were only about 100,000, maybe 80,000. Is that?
they cut them right down to 75,000 before I stopped
Wow.
writing for them.
Wow.
But it was a huge tomb, this thing.
Yeah.
And she said, we want to buy it, pay you $5,000 for it. So obviously my income had gone down
Yes.
Well,
5,000 for 5,000 words, 5,000 for 175,000.
in the 6 weeks that I'd waited to hear about this, I wrote another one. I said it in the US because it was Harlequin American and it was shorter.
Right.
Which to me at that stage looked good. And so, of course, they bought the second one as well.
Wow.
And from there on, I was so fortunate. That was the first thing I'd ever written, and it was accepted. I had no idea that that was unusual.
Yeah, the first short story wins a contest. Your first novel gets sold. The second novel gets sold. Is this like time to go out and buy a lottery ticket?
Don't forget, I still had three young sons.
Yeah. Wow.
I then just went ahead and wrote, I don't know, I wrote 17 more and sold each one of them. And then my editor said, there's an agent in New York who would like to represent you.
Right.
And he was the nicest man, but he was also a writer. And he was very well known. And I signed with him. And of course, I should have exempted my Harlequin books from that because he was getting 10% then of
and you
books
you were getting that anyway. Yeah.
Anyway, I didn't, and I sold, I don't know, 40 more probably to Harlequin.
Wow.
And I also during that time sold to Avon and Dorchester. These are companies that are probably not in business anymore.
Yeah, no, Dorchester's not around anymore. Yeah.
Dorchester maybe not. And a company called Leisure.
Yep.
And didn't make a lot of money on them. He didn't particularly push me. He was interested in selling himself, which I realized afterwards was, kind of a mistake. Yeah.
Wow.
Which is why I'm not mentioning his name.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. But that's interesting that that you had that experience where it was a really great experience where you were doing things with the publisher and then thought, okay, the agent's going to help take me to the next level. You just took the agent to the next level. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's something I see all the stuff out there of people desperately wanting an agent. I would really recommend just going with self-publishing, particularly these days. See?
Yeah, really.
So I think I sold my last book for Harlequin in 2006, and I parted company with the agent.
Okay.
And then it was, let me see, about 1982 when I got my first computer. That was a huge thing.
Oh, yeah.
It was one of the first ones. It was an IBM, and then after that, I got a thing called a Commodore. These were amazing.
I remember.
They were huge. And the first one I had, it seems to me, I could only print out one page at a time. I remember printing out a book and having to do just one page at a time. Right. It had no memory. It didn't have a lot of memory, see?
Oh, wow, yeah.
Yeah. So what did I do then? I wrote a whole bunch of short stories then and sold them to different Canadian magazines. I also sold to True Confessions, which horrified my boys. And yeah.
Was this still was it romance that you continued to write?
It was romance and some stuff about deafness. And I remember writing a thing about growing tomatoes on the prairie.
Okay.
I just wrote whatever I thought would sell. Yeah. Right. So about, when would it be? I gave up writing for a while and started a B&B in Vancouver. And then, of course, you can't give up writing. If you're a writer, you just write. I wrote a book called How Not to Run a B&B. and right at that point, I remember picking up a book about this thing that Amazon was doing, that it was starting a publishing business. And I made every mistake in the book. Instead of putting this thing with Amazon, I hired out. I I sent it to a vanity publisher
Right.
and paid a huge amount of money. They were very good. The book turned out fine. But again, that's not a route I'd ever do again.
Right.
So
Because
then
to make your money back would have taken a significant number of sales, right?
I think I've made it back, but
Yeah.
that was a long time ago. Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
So then, am I boring you with all this?
No, this
I
is
can,
fascinating. I love this. No.
what did I do then? I started on Amazon in about 2014, and I had been so fortunate because Marcia Zinberg, this lovely editor I had, got me back the rights to the books I'd written for Harlequin, which
Okay.
in those days was absolutely amazing. You just didn't get your rights back.
Yeah.
So what I did then was I only had the print copies, see, and I had them scanned, and I started putting them up on Amazon and just kept on writing and putting up my backlist and
Right.
started doing quite well. I'm not a writer who ever made six figures. I made high five figures
Right.
in the beginning of Amazon and at the end of Harlequin. But I've never thought that making money is the thing you should aim for. I really feel you should search for joy instead. And if writing makes you happy, then write what you want to write. See, the people that made big money on Harlequin were the ones who wrote what the editors wanted them to write,
Right.
wrote in stories, and only wrote what they were told to write.
Okay.
Yeah. I couldn't do that.
And even though you had the business knowledge and the marketing, like the know-how to understand what they were looking for and where your chances were good, which is very, very high business acumen, you still wrote stories that resonated with you and that you were passionate about, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I just can't write a story that I'm not super involved in. And it's the people in the story that fascinate me.
Wow.
And I need to get deep into them psychologically and figure out, now, why did they do that? Like, why are they acting this way?
Yeah.
And then I can write the book. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. That is amazing. So then 2014, you discovered you could use Kindle Direct Publishing directly. You had the rights back to many of your previously published books that were out of print, and then you were able to re-release those and kind of ride that wave for a bit, right?
And for a while, I did go wide for a while in the beginning, but it was through Smashwords that I distributed. And then there was all this hoo-ha about KU starting about this. So I took everything down, which is big mistake. See,
really, it wasn't good for you being exclusive. Like you weren't able to get the Kindle page reads, and
absolutely, I did. Like I did quite well with Kindle reads, but when I was about 75 or 76, I think I got sick, and my books were wide. But I thought, you know what? I'm just going to go straight with KU.
Right.
So I took them all down. I thought I took them all down.
Right.
There was one book up, I don't even know where, Somalia. Right. And I got a letter from Harlequin one morning or from Amazon one morning that said, we've taken all of your books down because you're not living by the rules of KU.
Wow.
Which was pretty horrific because I was single at this stage and living on what I made.
Oh my God.
So I sent a begging letter to Mark, was it Zuberg? I can't remember. Who was the head?
Jeff Bezos?
Bezos, yeah. I sent a begging letter to Jeff Bezos and really laid on the fact that I was getting older and I was supporting myself, and so he did very kindly reinstate the books. But there again, that was a sign for me. Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Wow.
And I'm preaching to the choir here.
Wow.
So I kept them that way. And the whole time I was sick, I was so grateful to those books because they went on earning me a few $1,000s a month, between 2,000 and 4,000, without doing anything. Occasionally, I'd advertise on the Fussy Librarian, but very rarely. And so they went on earning me money. And of course, I was quite sick. I had problems with my lungs and I was anemic, and I figured I was going to die. So I thought, not even going to fool around with those stupid books. Well, then I got better, which really, was sort of a disappointment, because now I had to start thinking about working again, about what am I going to do.
Right. Yeah.
So just a year and a half ago, I took all the books. I got your book, which I should have gotten a lot sooner. But I got your book and I read it, um, Wide for the Win. And I just thought, yes, what am I doing? This is so crazy. Because by then my earnings on Amazon had started to go down too. If you don't do anything with them, naturally they will. But also, Amazon changes the rules lots. So I thought, I'm going to take every one of these books down and go wide, just like you said. And that's another thing I wouldn't really recommend somebody doing. Don't take your books down from KU overnight. Don't do
You did them all at once.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah. I started out writing poetry. I ended up writing 40 long books. I started walking and ended up running the marathon. That's just my personality.
I'm in it. I'm going to do it, right?
Exactly. Overnight, I took every single one of the books down. And of course, my income dropped substantially.
Yeah, dramatically, I can imagine.
And I'm still trying to put this mass of books back up and write at the same time. Yeah.
So what happened at what point did that become a positive thing for you, like after that dip?
At what point?
Well, I mean, you said like you took a dramatic drop when you just went wide immediately.
Yeah.
How long did it take for things to start to grow again?
I still haven't gotten back anything near what I was, but I'm also an optimist, and I know you said very clearly this takes time. And so that's exactly what I'm relying on. I'm just putting books up and doing all the promo I can, and trusting that it'll come back.
So are you using things like Fussy Librarian or other promotional tools?
Absolutely. Yeah. Fussy Librarian and several of the, I joined the other Crave books and the other ones.
Written word media, places like that, right? So
and I just know that I'll start making lots more money. That's the thing. As you get old, I'm 83 now, and you don't need all that money. You don't need as much money. You're not,
right.
You're not traveling. I'm absolutely happy doing what I'm doing.
Buying a new house or anything like that, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question as a fellow Canadian?
Yeah.
Now that your books are wide again, have you registered with the Public Lending Right program for Canada?
Mark, that was the smartest thing I did. I did that when I was still working for Harlequin.
Oh, way back when. So you knew about the program way back then. Okay, great. Okay.
Yeah. I remember it was a hassle to do. And I did. I registered for it. And every year I get this wonderful check because the books are in libraries.
Now again, they're available again to libraries. So that's good. Good stuff. Awesome. Wow. So let me get this straight. So you said you started writing at the age of 40.
Yeah.
And therefore you have, I mean, I can do the math without taking my shoes and socks off. That means you have 4 decades of experience as a professional writer.
Yes.
Wow. And then it wasn't obviously until the mid 2010s that you discovered self-publishing and said, "Oh my God, these books that I've already published, I can bring them back." Because, as you know, I think romance readers are very voracious. They want to read as many books as they can.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's always the question, because you have to, when you have the book scanned, there's such a mess. You
Yeah.
have to go over them and really try to make them perfect again.
Right.
There's always the question, do you get in there and update with cell phones and all the rest of it?
Right.
And basically, I didn't do that. On some of the later books, there were cell phones, so it was okay.
Right.
I just didn't, I haven't done that. Yeah.
But you know what? There's books called, Pride and Prejudice and things like that where they haven't modernized, right? It still holds up to this day. So, I think I actually quite like the stories where we didn't have the convenience of that computer in our pocket, right? Because it creates some tension, especially with the distance between a couple if they can't communicate to one another. That creates a lot more tension in ways that we don't have in modern stories, I think, right?
Absolutely. And see, when I started using a computer, there was no internet. There was no nothing. And I do think that helped with not getting distracted. Like, I think that helped.
Did you write more then when it was on that computer that was not connected to, because there was no internet, and you got writing done? Now you're looking at cat videos and stuff like that.
I had the worst time learning that computer. I'm not at all technical, and that was a really hard one. Yeah.
Wow. So how do you, because you have so many books out that you've published, do you have a count of how many you've released over the years?
I really don't. I think upwards 50, maybe 60.
Okay. And then most of them you were able to bring back into print when the rights reverted back to you then?
Yes.
Okay. And so they're available in ebook. They're also available, I imagine, in print format too?
Some of them are available in print. I haven't done them all yet. It's a massive task, Mark.
It is. Yeah. Well, you know that draft to digital print allows you to just take the front cover in your Word document and they'll do a cover wrap for you, right? To save some of that time.
When you gave me that 20-minute gift, you told me that. And I haven't done it yet. I'm still putting books up.
Yeah, you have so much backlist to work on. And then it is difficult. It is difficult to go wide, because you have to be on various platforms, right? And that's not just one account anymore. It's at least 2, if not 3 or 4 or 5.
And not being technical, I
Right.
have to really try to learn each platform as I'm putting. I'm excited about artificial intelligence. I think this is a huge thing. I know writers are afraid of this, and I just think it's a marvelous tool that we can use. And
I love that.
Yeah, I mean, I do think fear drives a great deal of what happens with writers.
Yeah.
There's no way to put a book up and know if it's going to sell or if people are going to like it. And by the time you get the response, you've already published the book and put in a whole lot of effort.
Right.
You can get readers along the way, but it's really hard to ever predict what happens with a book.
Yeah, no kidding. And obviously you've had that experience with Harlequin, with Avon, with all the different publishers you work with, but then you experience it again as an independent author doing it yourself.
It's easier doing it yourself, because writing for Harlequin, what happened was, when you start writing, you get an advance. I got $5,000, which apparently nowadays, that's quite
It's a lot of money nowadays for an advance.
And then they used to give you $500 each time you sold them. You got a raise, see? So
okay.
As time went on, I was up to, I think, $16,000 advance with Harlequin.
Okay. Wow.
But new writers are coming along all the time, And if they can find a promising new writer that they can pay $2,000 to,
Right.
you really have to come up with extraordinary proposals in order to make the grade with them. So
Yeah.
what I was finding, and what a friend who was doing the same thing found, our proposals, we'd have to send in 2 or 3 before they'd accept one. See,
Really?
those were good. We were good writers. Harlequin is marvelous in that it taught us writing. We had harsh editors. We were told what would go and what wouldn't. And that's wonderful grounding for someone like me that had grade 12 from Sparwood High School and didn't ever have university or any courses.
Wow.
I taught writing at different times, but I've never actually taken any writing courses. Yeah.
This is just amazing. I have to, I mean, considering your vast experience in the writing worlds of traditional publishing and indie publishing, a lot of writers who've done both, I hear them say, "Oh, I wish I could go back to the day where I just sat at my typewriter and I wrote the books and they did everything." Now you have had both experiences. Is that a realm you would rather return to, or do you prefer having that full control as a self-published indie author?
I wouldn't ever want to go back to that.
Really?
You're reliant on what kind of an editor you get.
Okay.
There are excellent editors, and there's some that just aren't. And you're also totally reliant on someone else's opinion.
Okay.
Because, as I said, I had an agent, and I sent him off innumerable proposals that he really didn't do anything with. So
Right.
that's just my personal experience. I know some writers like the balance of having part of their work published and part not. Not
Yeah.
me. I think self-publishing it's the best thing that ever happened to writers.
Oh, wow.
The best.
Okay, cool. That is really cool. Are you, I mean, so you've got the backlist that you're still working on getting up. Are you still writing? Are you still writing new books, new material?
Absolutely. It's funny as you get old. I'm not too interested in writing romance about 30-year-olds. No.
No.
What I'm writing are I've written memoir. I wrote that memoir, How Not to Run a B&B.
Yeah.
And I wrote one that followed, How Not to Vanagon. And I'm writing one
How
now.
not to what? Sorry?
Vanagon. Do you know the old Volkswagen?
Oh, How Not to Vanagon. Okay.
Yes. Well, my niece has called me catch and release because of my history with men. I divorced 2 of them, and then I sort of have, gone through relationships, which is interesting because I think we do what we most need to learn as writers.
Right.
I obviously needed to learn romance and all the rest of it.
It was all research, right?
So along the way, I had this friend, and he and I were living in, a 5,000 square foot house in Sparwood. I couldn't stand it. I knew I'd made a mistake the minute he moved in. And so I just, for some reason, decided that if we bought a Vanagon, one of these little, and went touring across the United States, maybe it would work. I mean, if you can't live with someone in 5,000 square feet, try, 120 inches. And so I wrote a book about that called How Not to Vanagon, because of course it didn't end well.
Right.
It was fun, but it didn't end well. And then he, of course, took the van, and I love to camp. I found I really like to camp. So I bought a 14-foot little travel trailer that was wrecked. It, honest to God, looked like someone had made meth in it. And I painted it and fixed it up. And now I tow that behind my car and go camping by myself. So I'm writing, I called her Calamity Jane, because Calamity Jane was Canadian.
Yeah.
And Calamity Jane said, if a lady wants to be if a lady wants to be a legend, she should just damn well go ahead and be one. So,
I love that.
yeah. So I'm writing a book called Me and Calamity Jane.
Oh, is that another memoir?
Yeah.
Oh,
Because
wow.
I've
That's
learned, Mark, that you should write series. See, so if I have 3 in a series, I can do that wonderful promotion thing for series that I did well on when you recommended it.
yeah.
And yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Oh, that's fantastic. So you've got the new memoir. So you said, are you writing more second chance romance or other romance still, or is the memoir the latest stuff that you're focusing on?
The memoir is what I'm focusing on. And I think every book is a romance. It's a
Yeah.
romance as you get old, it's a romance with yourself. Like you figure out what you really want to do and you figure out what gives you joy and you just damn well go ahead and do it. Yeah.
I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. Oh, Bobby, as we get close to wrapping up this conversation, for any writers who are listening to this who have not yet taken the plunge with the pen or the keyboard or the typewriter or the Commodore or whatever it is, who haven't yet, given it a shot, what advice would you offer to those writers that are looking to get started?
Sit down and write. Glue your ass to the chair and do it. That's the only you can take all the courses in the world and they won't help you if you don't do it. And the other thing that I've really found, when I was writing for Harlequin and had to keep churning out a book every 6 weeks, I found a thing that really worked for me. It was you reached the point where you just feel you can't go on. And there was there still is, a very famous romance writer called Nora Roberts. Nora was famous because it was said she could write a book while she was waiting in a restaurant for a seat. And what I think helped me was just pretending to be Nora Roberts. You're a writer, you can pretend anything you want. So if you just change your mind about what you're doing, it really helps. Just pretend to be a famous writer in whatever genre you're writing.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love that.
Because when you change your mind about a thing, the thing you're looking at changes. And that's very, very evident with writing. Yeah.
Oh man, that's fantastic.
And I also always have this little thing on my computer that says, okay, God, I'll do quantity, you do quality. I think writing fast is the answer. There's no question. The faster you write, you turn out much better product if you write fast. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course you can't edit a manuscript that doesn't exist, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can always fix something once you've got it on your computer.
Right.
You can't fix it if you haven't done it.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. And
I tell them, don't get mixed up in this thing. You have to earn $100,000 with your books. You really don't. You really don't. That study was very interesting, that writers who write more earn more, but really the average was about $30,000, wasn't it?
yeah, it was not very high at all.
Yeah. That's one of the first honest studies I've seen because you get these things that say, I made $100,000 in the first month writing for Amazon. You're not going to do it. You're not going to do it. And again, write in series. If you can do it, write in series and just keep on doing it.
Oh.
That's the thing. Getting old is such a great thing because it's a good tool for writing. You just end up with lots of produce, you see, lots of product. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. Bobby, where can my listeners find you online and where can they find your books?
My books are everywhere. They're on Draft to Digital, on all the sites. They're on Kobo particularly. They're still on Amazon. And I'm trying to do Shopify. And
direct sales. Wow. Okay.
I am so hopeless at technology that I'm having trouble setting it up. And what I did was I diverted my website to Shopify before I should have. Remember I told you I made every mistake in the book?
Mm-hmm.
So now if you go to bobbyhutchinson.ca, you'll get junted off to Shopify, where really there is very little. See?
Nothing to buy yet. Yeah,
I'm going to put them all up.
Yeah.
Shopify.
Awesome.
I think that's a marvelous tool for writers. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, for sure. 100%. Bobby, thank you so much for hanging out with me today.
Mark, thank you. It's such a pleasure. So much fun.
There are a few things I want to reflect on based on that interview. I'll start with the last thing, which is the part of the advice Bobby was offering, which is, pretending to be Nora Roberts, or the idea of pretending to be a famous writer in your genre, or whatever that was. And I think it reminded me of the, dress for the role that you want, or for the position that you want. So it's kind of like, I'm going to dress up like Batman because I want to be Batman, which is maybe why I put on Spider-Man costume all the time. Who knows? Or dress up like John McClane and stuff like that for author photos. But that visualization is really important. Thinking, what would so-and-so do in that situation is a really important aspect. It could be somebody that it could be somebody you admire, and just putting yourself, because again, it's what we do when we write, especially when we write fiction, sometimes even memoir, is we put ourselves in the position of. Now, writing a memoir, you may be putting yourself in the position of where you were at the time. If you're reflecting on a particular thing or event that happened, you do still have to, even though you're the same person, you still have to put yourself in that mind. Or in fiction, you put yourself in the position of the character, or at least understand that character and where they're coming from, etc. So the visualization is really important in terms of the creativity and the writing process itself, but it can be really valuable in terms of the actual position that you're in, and sort of playing the role of, Nora Roberts would take advantage of this 5 minutes in the grocery store line, to use the example that Bobby shared, and looking at yourself and again, not just modeling yourself and trying to do exactly as somebody else did, but just trying to put yourself in that head space. Or thinking about that, and I'm trying to remember, I was just talking to someone about that in terms of defining themselves as not a wannabe writer, but I am a writer. I am a professional writer, and therefore professional writers do this. Therefore, I will do this, and owning that place that you want to be as a means of getting there. Oh no, you know where this was? It's funny. I thought it was a conversation, but Liz and I started working on jigsaw puzzles with the kids Christmas when they were here, and that's something we like to do in the winter months as a sort of together thing, is work on a puzzle together and listen to an audiobook. And we were listening to Arnold Schwarzenegger's new book, and there's some really great nuggets of wisdom from his methodology of success, and that's where I heard it. I thought it was part of a conversation, but I guess it was kind of a conversation, because Liz and I were ingesting the audio of that at the same time, so it felt like a conversation, if you know what I mean. and there are times when we'll pause the book and talk about things, which is kind of fun, or when we pause the book because we need to do some other things and stuff like that. We talk about what we just heard or what we just read together, and that visualization can be so important. And I think in the book, if I can reflect back on that, Arnold talked about not just saying that he hopes to be, hoped to be an actor, or that he wanted to when he wanted to get into politics, that he actually, and he uses that when somebody introduces the politician, the next governor of the state of California introducing blah, blah, blah. They do that for a specific reason, and that's part of that value and that importance and power of visualization. And so I think that can work for us as writers. Instead of, and we have a lot working against us. We have a lot of imposter syndrome constantly working against us. But just trying to remember that positivity that can come with the visualization. And then the other thing is, there's a couple things about Bobby. So Bobby has a career that's over 40 years of writing, which is amazing. What she has accomplished is amazing. But I mean, this is 40 years of her life. But here's the thing: she didn't really start to take it seriously until she was about 40 years of age. And in thinking about what she has accomplished, I mean, what did she accomplish in the first 40 years? Truly incredible. What most people can do in that time period. But then beginning this new career, this new path, this new journey, and that it wasn't young. It wasn't, at the age of 15, I wanted to write a novel, and then when I finished college, I finished it. No, this was something that she set out to do very deliberately, very specifically, strategized. She had a plan. She had a strategy. How she was going to do this. And she's like, okay, well, while I'm training for the Vancouver Marathon, I'm going to work on the story, because you spend a heck of a lot of time in your own head when you're training for long distance running. And so what a powerful thing. In long distance running and writing books and stories are so compatible when you think about them. They're both things where you spend a heck of a lot of time in your own head, and you spend a lot of time investing in the build-up to it. And Bobby did both of those in parallel in such a fascinating way. But every single thing she did, so she talked about, if you go back to and remember when she had submitted that first book to Harlequin, okay, what did she do? She went out and she got 100 books, and she read them all, and she understood, and she really understood the tropes and what she was writing. So she basically, she does talk about writing for passion, and I think that's an important aspect. She was passionate about this kind of story, but she learned and understood in depth what it was she was writing, so she could write the best romance novel, just like training for a marathon and getting your body into the rhythm. She was understanding and building all the different elements and the stories that would go into specifically Harlequin, just so she could sell to Harlequin. And then while she had sent off the first manuscript, waiting that 6 weeks or whatever, she worked on the next one. And wow, she's 60 books later. And all of those little steps add up over time. I just find it so fascinating how she applied, like I mentioned in the interview, a lot of business acumen when it came to writing. She invested time and energy and training in writing the kind of things she did. Now, again, going back to her advice, she wrote the things she was passionate about, the things she was really eager about. So she's passionate about the memoirs. She had 3 different memoirs. She's working on the Me and Calamity Jane, the latest one. Just fascinating tidbits of different elements of things that she did, like the van life and stuff like that. So I just think it's so fascinating when somebody just sinks their teeth into a project like that. What are those things that you're passionate about writing? What are those things that you can see yourself doing in the long run, the way that Bobby has done those things? Yeah, she's achieved a lot, and sometimes when you look at all that she's done and all the amazing things she's accomplished in just her writing career, you think, wow, I will never get there. It can be a little bit overwhelming. Well, I find it inspiring. I look at it and go, okay, great. What are those things that I can achieve if I commit, if I visualize, if I apply the energy and the resources into the training to get to that marathon of a writer's life? So a huge thank you to Bobby for a very inspiring and fun interview. A huge thank you to the patrons who support this podcast at patreon.com/Stark Reflections. A thank you to those of you who leave comments for episodes. And a thank you to you, dear listener, for listening to this podcast. You can always leave your comments, your reflections over at starkreflections.ca. Also would love if you shared a review of the podcast on whatever podcatcher you happen to listen to the podcast on. And you can also, this helps a lot, is share this podcast with somebody that you think would find value in it. Well, that's it for this episode. That's it for the reflections. I look forward to joining you next week, which will be next year or just next episode that you listen to, depending on when you're listening to this. So in 2024, I will see you in episode 340. But for now, this is Mark Leslie Lefebvre in episode 339, wishing you great writing and a happy new year and good Stark Reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.